Canadian baby given health card without sex designation. A Canadian baby has been issued a health document that doesn't specify male or female in what campaigners are claiming is a possible world first. Seryl Atli Doty was born in British Columbia outside the medical system and did not undergo a genital inspection after birth, campaign group Gender Free I.D coalition said in a statement. The group's vision, stated on its website, is to remove all gender/sex designations from identity documents. Hold up, what? Oh, great, another ideologue using children to push an agenda. See what you social justice nuts have done? It wasn't bad enough you had to get little girls to swear at a camera to promote your ideology.
What the fuck? I'm not some pretty fucking helpless princess in distress. I'm pretty fucking powerful and ready for success.
But now you have to get them right out of the womb?
Holy shit, Snacks.
Sometimes I think the human race is doomed. Parent Kori Doty wants to avoid assigning gender to the child. Doty identifies as non-binary trans. According to GLAAD, non-binary is a term to describe people whose gender identity falls outside the categories of man and woman. Trans, short for transgender, describes people whose gender identity doesn't match the sex or gender they were assigned at birth. I absolutely love how the social justice community co-opts the label trans from transsexuals. In a nutshell, they invented the idea that gender is a social construct disassociated from sex. Then they made up transgender as a term for someone not identifying as their assigned gender. But because it starts with trans, as does transsexual, they can share the same victim status as transsexuals and even claim their term is a broad term that includes transsexuals. They continually blur the lines between their own definitions that keep gender and sex separate, so they can keep shifting the goalposts. The sex designation on your birth certificate and health card are based on an evaluation of the person's biological sex. GLAAD, the organization cited for their definition of transgender, even has their definitions for sex and gender on their website. GLAAD defines sex as being a combination of factors including hormones, internal and external reproductive organs, and secondary sex characteristics. They also define gender as external manifestations of gender, such as name, pronouns, haircut, behavior, voice, and/or bodily characteristics. They define gender and sex as two different things. You will want to remember this because it will be important later. It is up to Seryl to decide how they identify when they are old enough to develop their own gender identity, Doty said in the statement. I am not going to foreclose their choices based on an arbitrary assignment of gender at birth based on an inspection of their genitals. Despite difficulties in obtaining a birth certificate, a health card for the baby with the sex listed as you has been issued, with the coalition saying it arrived one day without explanation. An image of the card shared by the parent includes the U designation in the child's name. It says the child was born in November and the card was issued in April. The Gender Free ID coalition believes that the U stands for unspecified or unknown, and that Seryl is the first child to be registered in such a way without sex or gender being specified. Or maybe the U can mean unreported? No choices are being denied to them. If gender and sex are two different things, your child can do whatever they like when it comes to their gender identity. But making the government put a U for their sex because they, as this article states, were born outside of the medical system and you refuse to tell the government your child's biological sex doesn't help your child. Medical professionals are now missing key information for helping your child. Thankfully, doctors aren't stupid and can potentially just look. And eventually, your biological sex will make it into your healthcare records. Doty's lawyer, Barbara Finlay, who does not use capital letters to spell her name, told CBC that birth certificates in British Columbia use only male or female designations. Finlay did not respond to CNN's request for comment. I just want to ask why anyone acknowledges this lawyer's request not to use capital letters in their name. It's a feature of the English language. Why do people give in to her special snowflake demands? Doty has applied for judicial review of the decision denying Seryl a birth certificate, supported by the Gender Free ID coalition. The parent will argue that requiring a gender marker violates the baby's rights as a Canadian citizen to life, liberty, and security of the person. It's a sex marker, not a gender marker. If you want to claim gender and sex are two different things and the card clearly says sex, then you have no leg to stand on. But no, we'll treat the two words as synonyms like the majority of the world when it suits your interests, then go back to separating them when it doesn't, right? But it gets worse. Separately, Doty is one of 8 complainants in a case being heard by British Columbia's Human Rights Tribunal, according to the Gender Free ID coalition. The complainants are seeking to have gender designation removed from all new birth certificates. They want this information removed from all birth certificates. For everyone. Key medical and personal information. The CBC also did an article on this ideologue. Much of the information is the same, but one point of note is Kori Doty's stance on assigned gender. Doty says a visual inspection at birth can't accurately determine what sex or gender that person will have or identify with for the rest of their life, whether it's because they have both male and female genitals, as is the case with intersex individuals, or because they don't identify with the gender they present, as is the case with transgender or non-binary persons. Doty makes the case, much like the Gender Free I.D. coalition, that the health card is listing a person's gender, not their sex. But let's look at a BC health card. See where it says sex female? That isn't a spot for gender identity, that's a spot for their biological sex. You can have whatever gender identity you want, but this card is stating your biological sex, because as a health card, this card gives you access to medical treatment on the government dime. The doctor or hospital needs to know what biological sex you have, because as a sexually dimorphic species, the different sexes have differing anatomies and health issues. But the Gender Free ID coalition doesn't see it this way. Isn't it a bit like the tinfoil hat crowd to say they want you to believe those are there to state your sex, but really they are for gender, despite what it actually says on the card? But that's sort of moot because the majority of society treat gender and sex as synonyms anyways. It's the gender politics crowd that separates them. But the coalition clearly differentiates sex and gender, but claim you can't tell sex from visual inspection of genitalia, which according to GLAAD's definitions is the chief method of determining sex. Even the coalition defines it similarly in their own resource section. Even they know your genitals can identify your sex. They state gender and sex are separate, but the moment it's put into practice, like identifying this baby's sex for their health card and birth certificate, suddenly the words get blurred back together, purely for the sake of deflecting. Then they go back to treating them as two separate ideas. Hell, Barbara Finlay, who prepared the resource section that states these terms, is the one also acting as Doty's lawyer in the case of Seryl's birth certificate. She should know these terms. She wrote them out for the world to see, but is going to bat for this team of wackadoos who continually redefine the words to make whatever case they want. Is it any small wonder I consider some of these ideologues so close to religion? It's just a whole bunch of ideological apologetics attempting to mask and cover up flaws in their logic. Anyways, that's it for me. Please rate, comment, subscribe, and I will see you next time.